I don't know how many of you remember this, but a couple months ago, I did a video about Candace Owens announcing that she's doing a documentary about the BLM financial situation. And I said in that video that this documentary needed to be something to wake the Black community up, because for so long, this organization and their figureheads have gone out publicly and said the Black community is poor, the Black community is disenfranchised, we always need help, the white racist institutions are not helping us, give us your money so that we can better the Black community ourselves, because these racist institutions are not going to do it. And if you've watched my videos, if you watch other people's videos, if you've seen all the articles throughout the year, you know that this has been a full-on embarrassment for BLM, because they've constantly been getting exposed for using that money for their own luxury and not bettering the Black community. And in my opinion, looking at the teaser trailer, looking at all the images, looking at how Candace Owens decided to promote the documentary, I thought it was going to be the final nail in the coffin to ruin any credibility for BLM, Patrice Cullors, and all these different people who went along and used dead Black men and women to make money off some emotional people who thought that they were doing a service to a bunch of marginalized Black people. So the documentary came out last night, and if I'm going to be honest, after watching it, I have some positives and I have some negatives about the documentary, because while yes, a documentary exposing BLM for their financial scams is something good, and I'm pretty sure there's an audience for it that will absolutely eat it up 100%, there were moments in the documentary that I felt missed the mark in trying to hammer home a point about how an organization decided to scam a bunch of people out of millions of dollars. But I'm going to start with the positives. And for a positive, I did enjoy the various perspectives of the different individuals in the documentary. You had George Floyd's roommates, you had a store owner whose store got looted, you had a news anchor who was married to a police officer, and when protesters found out about it, they made piñatas of those two individuals, went to their house where a state representative beat the piñatas to try to prove a point that he's fighting against racist individuals. And the news anchor was somebody who wanted to talk about all these different issues, and her job did not want her talking about it. And then she ended up leaving that company because they felt as if she was being a nuisance and not playing ball with the protesters who were openly harassing her on her own property. Now, you might think that that's the worst situation talked about in the documentary in terms of people wanting to speak about BLM and how looting is bad and all these random protests violating people's property is a bad thing to do, but it's the store owner, in my opinion, who had the worst circumstances brought upon him, because not only does he get looted by people who don't value Black lives, they only value their selfish greed, but he goes on social media to see Chrissy Teigen advocating for looters. He talks about it, he calls her out, and then he gets a bunch of Chrissy Teigen supporters harassing him and threatening him to take down the post and donate to BLM, and if he doesn't, they're going to push a narrative that he's a racist who doesn't care about Black lives. He only cares about items that could be covered by insurance. And if you've been on this channel for any length of time, I've told you how all these people want to go around pretending like they know everything about finances because they took an intro to economics class. Insurance does not cover everything, and the more you want to use that excuse, the more people are gonna think it's okay to rob people and pretend that it's for Black lives, which is funny because these same people who live in these bubbles, these gated communities, these isolated areas where they don't have to deal with that, is that we all know is that if these protesters and looters came to rob them, they would have a different tune to sing, because of course when it's other people you don't care, but when it's you, you're going to go balls to the walls to make sure everybody knows not to come rob you. Getting these different perspectives is important, because while a bunch of people want to only focus on the positives of the situation, there are people who are negatively impacted by these same people who want to gaslight you into believing everything is positive, because you have these individuals who defend themselves, who call out bad behavior, and for some reason they get pegged as racist, white supremacists, when all they're doing is defending their business, their home, their family, everything they hold dear. Why? Because they're seeing a bunch of people do something which is illegal that no one wants to happen to them. Another positive in the documentary is that it's noted that even though BLM used George Floyd's name to make all that money, they didn't provide any financial support to his roommates who were dealing with his financial situations because he's no longer on this earth, and Candace Owens decided she was going to help out and give them some support to deal with his back rent and tow his car out of their parking lot because they couldn't do anything about it because it was stuck in his name. One final note on the positive side is that towards the end of the documentary, Candace Owens Owens is taking part in 2 montages, one of which is her calling a bunch of organizations to see what they do with the money, and none of them pick up the phone. Is actually pretty funny. There is one organization that picks up the phone, but because of the scarcity of the information for legal reasons, you don't really know which organization it is. But you do get details about how they use money to send people out and train them to be protesters and looters and rioters in all these different areas. There is one organization in the documentary that's noted as getting the largest donation from BLM, and it's called Living Through Giving. And it's an organization that prides itself on giving out boxed lunches to the community. But when looking through their event list, Candace couldn't find anything previous nor anything that was present day. The next montage is Candace doing a rundown of how much money was donated to various organizations that revolve around sex work, pride, LGBTQ rights, and trans housing, and it totals up to $2.6 million. And one of those organizations, called Take, has a founder that was openly bragging about using the donation money for real estate, and that real estate was supposed to be used as a retreat for trans individuals, but they never held one retreat, and they gave out the various excuses that you would give out in 2020, but they used more money to buy the next door house and have still not held a retreat, which makes me think about the content creation house BLM spent money on, because yes, I'm still salty about that, because how in the hell do you spend money on a mansion and the goal is to provide content from various black creators that exist on all these different platforms, and that is supposed to do what for the black community? That's supposed to solve what issues? That's supposed to solve what turmoil? All it is a bunch of people who make garbage content holding up their phones and cameras saying, we're black, we're free, this is YouTube black, this is Twitch black, we're trying to fight back against the algorithm that holds us down, when they make watered down garbage content that nobody watches, and they blame white people for why they're not famous. Yes, I'm still salty about that, and yes, I went on a tangent and I apologized for that, but it's time to get back to the main topic. It's time to get into the negatives, and I know a bunch of you are going to raise an eyebrow at me when I say this, because the promotional art for the documentary literally has George Floyd's name on it, and it's meant to signify how BLM used George Floyd's name to make all that money. But I do feel the parts about George Floyd are absolutely pointless, because everyone already knew these details about George Floyd. Everybody knew about the body cam footage, the parts that were left out, the full body cam footage, the inconsistencies of people's reporting, people talking about how it's a travesty that this happened to George Floyd, and when people ask if they've seen the body cam footage, they say no. This was all public information, and people choosing not to look at it is their own fault. And as somebody who did look at it and talk about it and detail how this adds a little bit more detail to the situation and not the 15-second clip that was promoted for everyone to see, it was absolutely pointless to my eye. But that's the point. As somebody who's seen it already and knows all the details, it's supposed to be pointless to me. It's not supposed to really catch my eye, and I'm giving it a little bit more leeway because it's the introduction leading into the topic of BLM using all that money. The second negative, in my opinion, is bringing up George Floyd's past criminal activity. And I know there are a bunch of people at the time, and maybe even still to this day, treating George Floyd like a hero, as somebody who should be praised, as somebody who is a saint. And yes, mentioning that he is somebody who is not an innocent party could be something necessary if it was related to the incident that made him famous. In my opinion, just bringing up all these past instances that have nothing to do with the situation that is the result of this documentary and the overall topic of BLM scamming, I feel like that provides nothing but letting people know, hey, you have all these people in the media saying he's a good guy and he never did anything wrong, but in reality, he has a past that lets everybody know he's not a good human being. I just feel like in these instances where people want to bring up past unrelated to the topic of the situation, it just muddies the water and gets people more distracted from the actual situation at hand. The third negative ties into the first negative in how the story of George Floyd is used as the introduction to talking about BLM being a scam. The documentary is an hour and 18 minutes long, and 49 minutes in, I'm asking myself, when are they going to get to the part about BLM being a scam? How long is this documentary still going to be? How many more minutes until we get into BLM using the money not for the black community, but for other organizations that don't really benefit the black community? And it wasn't until about 52 minutes and 7 seconds in that we start getting into the BLM scam portion, which I feel is a letdown, because if you're trying to tell a bunch of people that this organization scam people, yes, you have the montages just detailing how much money went where and how much didn't go to the black community and how much went towards people in the inner circle of Patrisse Cullors. But that's information we already knew, which leads into the final negative. A lot of this information about the 990s, the IRS tax forms, how BLM has all this money and yet they don't file any taxes. Everyone knew that already. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you've seen any of my videos, you've read any articles, you've seen other people's videos about this, you would know BLM, Patrisse Cullors gave all that money to people in the inner circle. And while yes, you can counter that and saying this is in more detail, I would argue depending on the ones they bring up, no, it's not, because I talked about how BLM gave money to the baby daddy instead of giving the money to the Trayvon Martin Foundation. I just recently talked about how one of the head honchos is getting sued and claiming that they're using the forms of white supremacy to hurt him because how dare they call him out for scamming a bunch of people. Oh, Patrisse Cullors used the $6 million mansion to throw a birthday party for her son and used it for an inauguration party. I already talked about that. These are things that were already known publicly and talked about on all these different platforms by people who have spent immense time talking about how BLM scammed a bunch of people out of money, how they finessed people, how they preyed on people's emotions, how they used dead black men and women to make all that money and disperse it within their own group. I guess if I could wrap it up all in a neat little bow, if you're somebody like me who's already known about the financial scam that is BLM, the documentary does nothing for you. Yes, you'll get a couple of nuggets of information you probably didn't know about, but overall, it's just the same things discussed by various other people with the added addition of, hey, this money went here also. But if you're somebody who's completely oblivious to BLM, or you're somebody who knows that they're a scam, but you never did any deep dive into it, the documentary is perfect for you, and I would recommend you watch it. Overall, I do think that this could be something, if promoted more, could be a complete nail in the coffin for BLM. And it's something people should see in order to understand that this organization that used all these people to make money, that preyed on all these emotions, did absolutely nothing of benefit and actively embarrassed themselves and gaslit people into defending them rather than calling them out for the behavior with that money. And it's a shame that even still to this day, as I'm recording this, maybe she'll make a response, maybe not, Patrisse Cullors has still not said a word and is still on a mental break because she got called out numerous times by not just Candace Owens, by not just me, by not just Officer Tatum, but a bunch of people who exposed the lie that is BLM, and has still not opened her mouth to say a word, and has not held herself accountable, and has not looked at any of the people in the organization either and held them accountable either. So at the end of the day, I've said it numerous times, I'll continue to say it as long as the organization exists, but the more and more you want to use people and prey on their emotions and use dead black people and be inconsistent when it comes to black lives because it's convenient how we only care about those black lives when it revolves around a white person as the perpetrator, you will continue to hear me say these simple words: fuck BLM, because I can't stand that organization. Subscribe to the channel. If I'm gonna give a 1 out of 10 rating, I give it a 7 just because, hey, it wasn't for me. I already knew a bunch of this information, but I did like the cinematography. I like the camera work. I like the makeup. I like the different perspectives. Overall, I would recommend people to watch it. So subscribe to the channel. I'll see y'all in the next one. Goodbye.